Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the auditory processing disorder, that is the gap between the hearing and understanding. So our group members are Alison Abigail Gomez, Jairo David Castillo, Deborah Yael, and Keren Yadira. Um, to start, I will ask you to imagine that you are in a loud room or in a crowded park, and a person is trying to speak to you, but the only thing that you can hear is the noise in the background. And you ask them, "What?" hoping them to repeat what they just told you. But suddenly, 2 seconds later, you has understand what they just tell you before they repeat it to you. For many people, this is a small incident, but for a person with auditory processing disorder, this happens all the time. Auditory processing disorder, or APD, is not a problem with the ears themselves, but a problem with how the brain processes the sounds. And your ears do their job, but the audio editor of your brain is slow. Now we are going to look the difference between hearing and understanding. So first, a hearing loss is a physical problem where the ears cannot catch the sounds clearly, and APD is when the sounds enter to your ears perfectly, but your brain has some difficulties in translating that sounds. In science, we call this decoding. We know that our brains are very fast to translating that sounds into a language, but a person with APD cannot separate the voice from the noise in the background. It is like trying to listen to one person while in the background 10 radios are playing different songs in at the same time. Now, the working memory gap. Your brain loses a lot of energy trying to avoid all that noises in the background and try to find in the words. And because of this, it loses spaces on its working memory. I will give an example of this. Imagine that you are in a cafeteria. Uh, it is a noisy place, right? There are many people talking, laughing, and a friend of you is giving you three examples. The number one says, "Meet me at the library at 5." The number two is, "Bring your notes." And the number three is, "Don't forget your book." But if you have APD, your brain might stay in the word library while trying to avoid all the noises in the background. And when your brain finished to translating the word library, your friends has already finished on giving you the instructions. So as a result, the message is incomplete. And the instructions feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. It is important to mention that auditory processing disorder is not something related to intelligence, and that many people with APD are very smart and creative, and they just see and hear the word in a different way. And I hope that once you know the difference between hearing and understanding, you become a better speaker. And if you let me, I would like to give you an advice, that is, if you are talking to someone and they seem confused in an environment that is noisy, just be patient because their brain is fighting the battle between trying to understand the words that you are speaking and the noise that they hear at the same time. So if you can go to a quiet place so they can catch up what are you trying to explain them. Thank you.
In psycholinguistic, auditory processing is the first step in the language comprehension. The sound of human speech, once heard by the ears, must be processed properly by the brain to be understood. people with APD face difficulties in this decoding process, meaning their brain cannot efficiently transfer the sounds into understandable meanings. Although auditory ability, sound detection, may be normal, the processing of that information at the cognitive level is compromised. Example: imagine a person with APD listening to the teacher in class. As the teacher says a word, that word may be distorted or even unrecognizable, especially if there is a background noises, making it hard to follow the discourse. From a psycholinguistic perspective, APD represents a disruption in the early stage of decoding and processing speech sounds. This is closely related to how the brain converts auditory signals into linguistic representation, which are then integrated into our working memory and comprehend cognitively. Studying APD offers valuable insights into auditory representation difficulties and how they affect language comprehension. For example, a person with APD may hear words clearly, but when given an instruction in a noisy environment like a cafeteria, they might struggle to fully understand that phrase, as if the words became mixed or confusing.
Hello everyone, my name is Deborah Velasquez and today I want to talk about the relevant psychology theory for APD. So there are several psychological models that can help explain how APD affects language comprehension and production. So we want to talk about this type of models. So we want to start with model one is modular processing model, and the second is interactive processing model and working memory model. So we want to start with the number one, modular processing model. So this model suggests that the human brain processes language through the various emphasis modes. One of these models is responsible for the auditory discrimination and converting sound into linguistic representation. So in people with APD, there may be a dysfunction in this model, interfere with the ability to interpret speech sounds clearly. So we can have this example. A person with APD may hear a word perfectly fine, but they are unable to process all the parts of the word properly. If the piece of the auditory pixel were out of the place, so he can listen, he can hear the word, but he don't understand because this person are unable to process all the parts of the word properly, so they have some difficulty to understand. In second, we have interactive processing model. According to this model, language processing is not a sequence but a first interactive. People with APD may have a difficult using a linguistic context to predict and understand words. In other words, the interruptions in auditory perception not only affect the decoding of the sound, but also make it hard to use a contextual clause to complete the meaning of the word. So we have one example. In a conversation, if someone with APD cannot process properly the word dog in a sentence line, they dog run fast. They may relay the context clause like the speaker gesture that guess the meaning, but they may struggle with the keywords. So mm, this person don't have the ability to understand the sentence because have some difficulties to put in an order and what is the meaning of that. And at the end, we have this model, a working memory model. This model highlights the importance of auditory memory and linguistic process. People with APD often have a difficulty with auditory working memory, meaning they struggle a whole to manipulate auditory information with a processed language. This can make tasks like remembering verbal instructions, following complex conversation, and handling multiple resources and auditory information at once more difficult. So we have an example in a scenario like a word meeting where several important points are mentioned by different people. Someone with APD may forget the crucial details because they couldn't retain the auditory information effectively. So he don't have the ability to understand or hear the information in his brain. So, in conclusion, auditory process disorder is not just a problem of hearing, but a complex disruption in how the brain processes, interpret, and use auditory language. So, understand this model can guide more effective strategy for support, intervention, and communication, which may help individuals with APD navigate language more successful in everyday life. So it's really important to try to identify if some people have this problem because if we know that we can help and also we can try to uh, use different strategies to try to give support to when we are in front of the person to have it.
Hello, my name is Karen and I'm going to talk about a little bit the impact of APD of language and cognition. Well, the auditory processing disorder or APD affects how the brain processes sound and this impacts both language and thinking skill. Well, in verbal comprehension, people with APD have difficulty understanding spoken language, especially in noisy environments or when instructions are long. They may only understand part of what is said because their brain doesn't process sound correctly. So, in language production, they may have trouble organizing their speech or noticing their own mistakes because they can't they can clearly hear themselves. So, APT also affects reading and writing, and since these skills depend on connecting sound with the letter, and this makes it in, harder to read words correctly or write them. To help people with APT, there are several strategies. Some of them are teacher can repeat or simplify instruction. Assistive technology like microphone can improve hearing in noise places. It is helpful to create a quiet environment. And finally, using visual aids and gestures can support understanding. So, to conclude, APD is not a hearing loss, but it strongly affects language processing. With the right support, people with APD can improve their communication skill and overcome many challenges.